In the summer of 2016, we talked with University of Arkansas weed scientist Jason Norsworthy about the challenge of controlling Palmer amaranth. Arkansas features Palmer amaranth with multiple resistances, and Dicamba has been one of the few control options. The state is now arguably the epicenter for Dicamba-related problems. The University of Missouri estimates Arkansas contained more than 900,000 Dicamba-injured soybean acres in 2017, more than any other state in the nation. And the state's Department of Agriculture has received nearly 1,000 complaints involving Dicamba misuse this year alone. Since mid-October, when the Environmental Protection Agency classified the herbicide as a restricted-use pesticide, several states have tried to limit further issues with even tighter regulations. The Arkansas State Plant Board proposed a rule to ban Dicamba in row crops between April 16th and October 31st. Speaking at the Nebraska Soybean Day and Machinery Expo in Wahoo last week, Jason said the conversations about Dicamba have created a divide between farmers like he's never seen. We talked with Jason before his presentation and asked him to describe what this year has been like for growers in Arkansas.
I tell you what, it's been a different year for us in the state of Arkansas. Starting back probably late May, early June, we really began to see issues with Dicamba, and then unfortunately for us, throughout most of the summer months, we spent the months looking at Dicamba, trying to understand why we saw the mass amount of damage we did across vast acres within the state of Arkansas, and really understanding, trying to gather some research data that would help us understand that herbicide.
What have you learned about the yield impacts to soybeans that were damaged?
You know, if we take a look at Arkansas, I think we were very fortunate this year from a standpoint of having cool, wet conditions in the month of August. Typically, we're in the upper 90s, low 100s. This year, we're in the upper 80s, low 90s, and with that, we had an opportunity of those soybeans that were damaged early on to recover. And I'm hearing now that the state average is going to be 50 bushel, which is going to tie, I believe, our state average. The fact that also we had a July the 10th cutoff ensured that we were damaging vegetative soybeans rather than reproductive. A lot of the research data conducted not only in Arkansas but across the U.S. would indicate that if you have Dicamba on a flowering soybean, it's going to cause substantial yield loss, less so with a vegetative soybean.
Well, it seems like it's been hard to nail down the yield impacts. The farmers will say, well, what's the yield impact, and why is it so hard to nail that down?
I think that's very difficult because when we do research, you have a treated plot, you have an untreated plot. When we look at Dicamba drift in a research plot, you can go out and you can say, here's the untreated yield, here's the treated yield. You go to a field, what are you going to compare it back to? So you cut 70 bushel. Well, should have those beans have cut 72 bushel? Should they have cut 73 bushel? There's nothing out there ultimately to compare it back to, and for that reason, it becomes very challenging to pinpoint an exact yield loss.
What have you learned about how damage occurs?
You know, we've learned a lot. If you go back to the state and we begin to look early on in the year, we saw a good bit of physical drift, and I'm talking May. In May, we could go and we could look at a field and we could find physical drift from that field. You could see as the damage moved across the field, it began to dissipate. And with that, it was damage due to individuals possibly using the wrong nozzles. They had the boom heights, wind speed was incorrect, buffers, etc. But we've also seen the volatility research we've conducted is a major player in terms of contributing to the off-target movement of Dicamba. And that's the research not only conducted in Arkansas, but it's Kevin's Bradley data in Missouri, there's data out of Tennessee, there's some data out of Nebraska, Indiana now. University weed scientists across the U.S. now have a wealth of data that would indicate that volatility is a component. I'm not saying it's the entire issue that we've dealt with, but it's a component of what happened in 2017.
The stricter protocols that the EPA has now put in place and several states have even gone further into, does that fix the problem?
I wouldn't say that it fixes the problem. Will it help the problem? I believe it will. It's going to help, I believe, further reduce some of the physical drift. We did have some physical drift issues. So the EPA's label was, I believe, designed to address the physical drift issues. It was designed to help with tank contamination, try to reduce the risk associated with that. There wasn't a lot there to help correct the volatility issues, and what we're going to talk about today is as you spray later and later in the growing season, the risk of that volatilization is likewise going to increase.
Some people outside of agriculture have looked at 2017 and said, why didn't we see this problem coming? And I read an article where you said we did see this problem coming. With that in mind, what do you see for 2018?
You know, I'm hopeful. With resistance management, we need every tool possible, and I'm hopeful that we can take a step in the right direction. You know, I'm going to ask today, what does a 2018 growing season, a successful growing season look like? Because I honestly think we need to go into 2018 having established what we're going to consider success. I would contend 2017 was not a successful season. So what are we going to do to correct this problem? I think there are some steps that we can take. I think the EPA's label is going to help address some. I think there's some things that we can do, not only as researchers, but growers throughout the U.S., applicators can do to try to help address this volatility issue. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful we can get this corrected. Otherwise, of course, everyone is aware of the fact those labels expire November, December of 2018, so hopefully we can get this corrected.
What's your definition of success?
You know, I think if you take a look, and I've told individuals, I think success is that we don't have the level of damage that we see with a herbicide. There's no reason to believe that the level of damage that we see with Dicamba should be any different than another herbicide that's on the marketplace today. Talking glyphosate, I'm talking gramoxone, I'm talking Liberty. Why should Dicamba be held to a different standard than the other products that we're using today?
What will you study next with Dicamba?
You know, we're hoping to go back in next year and look at some earlier applications and try to understand how soon in the growing season we're beginning to see volatilization. Unfortunately, this year, we had some drift onto our research plots where we were actually wanting to study volatilization, and for that reason they had to be destroyed and planted later in the year. So most of the research that was conducted was late under warmer growing conditions. So I'm wanting to focus on that early application, maybe even in my geography, early May, late May, and try to time those and understand the risk associated with that. We also have some evidence out there that possibly some other factors, this is a very complex system, and I think there's other factors than solely what's going in the tank is contributing to the volatilization of these products. So we're trying to understand really what is contributing to this and understand ways that we can minimize the risk associated with this volatilization.